Bologna was an amazing sculptor. He was a cool dude. He had the Apennine Colossus. And Lord knows I looked at that thing because I used The Rape of the Divine Woman for the cover of Slavery. To me, that, and this is going to be very, very interesting later on, represented human futility in such an incredible way. This guy in the middle, two people are experiencing sorrow, stress, they're horrified, and then the guy in the middle is just aggressive and addicted and a slave to sin, a product of the awful things that this world is. And I was flipping through an art book and I saw that and I said, boom. I mean, this is huge. This is the cover of Slavery. I didn't know, I knew I wanted it to be a sculpture on the cover because something about a sculpture on the cover just makes a album massive, right? It makes it, yeah, monumental, right? Um, I that when we did Slavery on Gates of Hypnos, when we dropped it there, Tremo did the write up that he did on it. I was like, oh, that was humongous, because he's someone whom I've looked up to. Felt good that album was appreciated because that album was what I made before I got involved in noise, and the whole rest of my discography. Of course, for me, Handwritten Letters was kind of my opus. Once I made that, I went through a lot of spiritual struggle and distress in making it, and then I had a lot of grace and joy, and then I was able to finish the record. And so for me, that's my piece, right? That's the album of a lifetime. But then Slavery came along, and I made that. It was bigger in a lot of ways. And that's what I'm going to talk about today. Go ahead and roll the intro. Slavery was a concept that had been in my head possibly even way back when I was working on Handwritten Letters. These albums, they took a while. Man Hates God, Slavery, Portraits of Cain, Handwritten Letters, those albums were about a year at least each. Especially, well, Portraits of Cain wasn't long or really complicated. I think I did a good job and I was consistent with it, which was great. I was learning to create an album, and it was different at the time. Of course, I've made a video on that, and I never did one for Handwritten Letters because it was too hard to explain. But Slavery came. Oh, when I was in school, I was doing online classes with First Institute studying recording arts and show production. I had gone from using Reaper and recording on cassette tapes to using Pro Tools, to doing all this fancy stuff. And I had a humongous MIDI library. My ability exploded right around the time of Volume 5. I was learning still when I made Volume 5, so there was a lot of... And by the way, Anchor came out as a Contrite Heart single, but it's from Volume 5. It came out as a single from me, Ivan Reish, and then it was for Volume 5, but I released it as a single, and then I re-released it under Contrite Heart. Kind of reusing stuff. I feel bad. And I should make a new Contrite Heart soon. I apologize. But I've been focused on Slavery. And I felt like this is a time when I'm not listening to too much. I'm not scouring through Rate Your Music as much as I was. I've got a clear head, and Slavery was just released on Gates of Hypnos, so I think it's a good time to kind of address it. So while it wasn't Handwritten Letters, it wasn't actually what I made in a difficult time. The things that followed that difficult time were huge. Pursuing a career in audio, which I would not have done had I not had that life-changing event that happened as I was working on Handwritten Letters. It caused me to do a thing like actually study recording arts and show production, and start using Pro Tools and actually invest in a career in music as opposed to doing it as a hobby. Also, that obviously becoming a Christian brought about a interest in Christian literature. I don't want to say theology. I was pretty heavy-headed with theology at first because Calvinism was a huge issue. And if you're familiar with theology, you can definitely see Calvinism and slavery playing a huge role, because that played a huge role in my salvation. It was God's grace on me. Now, of course, I've addressed being a slave to sin, and that was where I started. But with all these projects, they start with looking outward, looking at the sculpture, and saying, this is the circumstance for humanity. This is not just the circumstance in this sculpture from a long time ago. This is the circumstance for humanity. And I know that rape doesn't really mean rape, it really means seizing or something like that, but seizing used to mean that as well. I don't know what the sculpture means, but it really has a lot of emphasis and shows human futility in a lot of ways. I don't even think they were humans, they were like Greek gods or something, am I right? I don't know what the circumstance was. I don't know what Giambologna's purpose was, but I know that it was rather impactful toward me. And yeah, so I started making it, and it became kind of a self-reflection thing. I read the book Slave by John Piper, and what you learn from that book is the word doulos is the Greek word used for slave or servant at the very beginning of the book of Romans, which anchors down this album. Paul introduces himself. He says, Paul, a servant of Jesus Christ, called to be an apostle. A servant actually means a slave. The reason we use this language as slave, the reason I would prefer the translation that says slave as opposed to servant implies willingly helping. And that's not the circumstance for mankind. The circumstance for mankind is that you're bought and paid for by the blood of Christ, that mercy has been had on you. So you're owned by him. And it's by his grace that we could live for him instead of for ourselves. Because we know it's absolutely futile. We know from the circumstance with the man capturing the woman, in his own power, he has become a slave. He's pursued his own power. What good does that do him? So this is one of the things that I hate about psychology, even modern Christianity. We kind of always address new ideas and new versions of Christianity. Biblical Christianity transcends. It's been around for thousands of years. Why are we trying to change it? Why does some guy all of a sudden have the answers? And I think that it would do us a lot of good to be humble and look at the text for what it says and not really push to go beyond that, because that's what we're doing. We're looking for a way to empower ourselves. It's self-empowerment with Christianity, with modern kinds of Christianity and philosophy. Even Stoicism presents the idea that you are going to be so self-sufficient that you can carry yourself forward, when that's also the thing that causes all these horrible things. So what you want is a dependence. Very surface level, very at the seed of the project. I had so many more ideas and so much further that I could take the project, because I didn't want to do another incredibly upsetting negative album like Man Hates God again. And Handwritten Letters was close to being that. It played with the idea. Well, it was all about death, which is kind of a positive thing. Slavery is also kind of a positive thing in the end, eventually. And it's a difficult argument for me to make for you, and I hope that you would have that spiritual, inward looking. It started off as a criticism of myself and humanity and what sin is and just what it is to be trapped. We think of ourselves in sin as being empowered, doing whatever we want. And I'm sure that that's with why we have these horrible men that start wars, and why we have these horrible men that take advantage of women. Well, they feel empowered, and we don't want to be empowered kind of people. We want to be servants of God. I have known God, and I have been able to put myself aside and pursue him instead of pursuing myself. And I try to go back all the time. John Piper does a really good description at the beginning of it, of the release Blindness, the opening track. And I had originally intended to make Blindness just like I made Velvet. If you remember, I don't know if anybody was familiar with it, but Velvet was outtakes from this. It was the Effectus Carnalis suite. The Effectus Carnalis suite was originally just field recordings mostly. You can hear me talking about indulgence, drinking coffee, and dipping, which was or two, coffee still, but dipping at that time was a difficult addiction I had. I recorded myself talking in circles. I thought I would have these conversations with people, and they would make a statement and then go and then talk about it for a bit and then make the same statement and go, "Yep," and then make the same statement again and then talk about it again and then so they found a way to keep talking even though I wasn't really saying anything. They would keep talking in a circle, and I thought that was so brilliant. So I recorded myself doing that and talking about you don't want to swallow the spit. You just want to spit it out and don't even worry about it. And I kept saying that over and over again. I did the same thing with the coffee. It just helps me. It just helps me. I have a phobia of, and I did that. So that suite was weird. um, as far as those recordings were kind of confined and consolidated. I did that in a, oh, I think all those recordings were in one day. The piano and the knocking, which is so interesting. I reused some of those audio clips, or a friend of mine reused them. I accidentally sent him the files from Slavery that I had recorded, the field recordings. I had this folder full of them, and I suppose I had left some of those from that day on the track, and it was used on Alfredo Vogue's album that I produced for him, and he just used them. I said, "It's fine. It's fine. You have my permission." It was used for my artistic statement. Now it can be used for yours. It's kind of being used for the same artistic statement in a different context. You know, I know what I said when I knocked on that piano and I played those keys and I barked. It was so interesting. I didn't have the same screaming that was present and vomiting that was present in Man Hates God and Handwritten Letters. The vomiting was a key part of Handwritten Letters. Uh, it didn't work. Did I ever talk about that? Oh man, I tried to vomit for Handwritten Letters, the big transition, the end, the difficult part, and I did the thing. I ate a big meal from Sheetz. I had a burger and fries, and I put my fingers in the back of my throat and went "Bleh," in a metal can and recorded it. I don't know if it was this mic, but I recorded that and it just went plop, like I dropped a pancake in the bottom of the pan. And then I was like, that doesn't work at all. The best part was me gagging, but it just didn't work in the metal can, and I just gagged. I didn't get a good recording of myself vomiting. I should have had more fluids and been hydrated when what I did was ate heavy, like greasy food so that it was all one big plop when I went to throw up. But I went through the pain to get that sound. It just didn't work. So yeah, this release was very different in that it was laid back and it took a lot more time to make you uncomfortable and it kind of had me breathing. It didn't have the intensity that Handwritten Letters had in the Lost Mischsterben suite. Oh gosh, and I don't know if I should try to pronounce all the Latin phrases and Hebrew phrases that I use for the titles of the album or of the tracks in Slavery, but obscurity in the mind, pleasures of the flesh, right? This follows the John Piper metaphor that the album starts out with. You convince yourself that it's a tuft of velvet when it was a fly that made you blind. So you become obscure of the mind, and then you're able to indulge in the passions of the flesh. I believe that was referencing Romans 1 verse. They exchanged the truth of God about God for a lie and worshipped and served the creature rather than the Creator, who is blessed forever. Amen. Therefore God gave them up to the lusts of their heart, to impurity, the dishonoring of their bodies among themselves, because they exchanged the truth about God for a lie. I read backwards. That's really where you get that whole first chunk, like the small introductions and all the way to the Effectus Carnalis suite. Then the Affectus Carnalis suite with some like Psalm 88, right? I express myself breaking down. Mortificatio carnis or carnalis. Um, Mortification, the death of self, right? As opposed to mortification of sin, killing sin, I was talking about the death of self, which these are kind of playing the same role here. You give up on yourself and serve the creator rather than the creature. And that prayer that I had on that track, first of all, I think a lot of people were able to relate to it, and I'm really glad. And it makes me cry when I listen to it, and it makes me cry knowing that other people cry listening to it. And I'm really, whenever I hear something about someone who would listen, if someone mentions having listened to that, it's very encouraging. That track itself is incredible. And that's not a prayer that was just had when I recorded that. That's a constant prayer of mine. That happens all the time. But it's followed just like it's followed in the release with Soli Deo Gloria, with to be a slave of righteousness, right? That's what the Greek phrase at the very end means. The Hebrew phrase means God is slow to anger. We kind of have the forbearance example in there as well. And just this beautiful unfolding of a person, this beautiful realization and comfort in God's grace. When we get to the slave language, what then? Are we to sin because we are not under law but under grace? By no means. Do you not know that if you present yourself to anyone as obedient slaves, you are slaves to the one whom you obey, either of sin, which leads to death, or obedience, which leads to righteousness? But thanks be to God that you who were once slaves of sin have become obedient from the heart to the standard of teaching which you were committed, and have been set free from sin, have become slaves of righteousness. I'm speaking in human. This is important to note because this changed my perspective of it. I said, oh goodness, yes, I want to be a slave to righteousness. I want to only do righteousness. I don't like my old life that I spent for myself, hurting other people. I see what I've done to other people. I hate it. I love those people. I don't want to live like that anymore. I don't want to concern myself with myself. And when you see the grace that was put forth for you, the death that you caused, that was taken for you on the cross, it changes you as a person, and you no longer want to live in a self-centered way. So I was excited. I am excited to no longer be my own. I don't want to be owned by sin. The initial framework of which this piece was created, being owned by sin. I do want to be owned by righteousness. That's all I want. But Paul mentions here that I'm speaking to you in human terms because of your natural limitations. So maybe this slave language is aggressive. Of course, we are said to be, as he brings up later in Romans 8, children of God. We have no longer the spirit of slavery, but the spirit of adoption. So he's really actually taking that slave language out. He says we're obedient children rather than obedient slaves. So I think that there's a combination of both. You want to be dependent on God as a child would be, or dependent on the leadership of Jesus Christ as a child would be to their parent. There's no self-sufficiency. Oh, I can pull it up. These are hard to look through. They're very complicated. I would recommend if you're going to read those, read through them. But don't just look for a specific. I don't know. Probably not. I don't think anybody actually owns those big sets of books and reads through them. But as the scripture says, so then it depends not on human will or exertion, but on God who has mercy. It's not our doing that we're saved. So that's what freedom of the will was about, and it was obviously I named it right after the book by Jonathan Edwards. It has this beautiful presentation, though, the way that those were organized. Maybe I can pull it up in a PDF format or add in a video of just how that looks. But yeah, that was why I did that. I have a huge thanks to give to Shremo for putting this out. The Mercy Vacuum, who is an incredible artist, go check out. He added so much depth to that project. I was a big fan of his. He had done a release called Clean that I recommend you go check out. As far as I know, his projects are available on Spotify, YouTube, and Bandcamp. So go check his work out. He's amazing and posts the funniest memes on Instagram. Makes me laugh sometimes. Just his story every day would be the thing. It'd be like people promoting stuff and then him posting the dumbest, most hilarious memes. But his music is like intense. And it was intensity on this. Gorgon's Altar helped me with this record. I didn't end up using what he gave me to work with. As you could imagine, with something at this length, there are things that get lost. But I was really grateful to be able to communicate, and those guys were the guys that I was around before Roman Shower, before Pstromo, before anybody. They were just friends or acquaintances that I had earlier on. The Mercy Vacuum, I would say, is a friend. I was acquainted with Gorgon's Altar, who's incredible. He has the most incredible dungeon synth and lore behind his dungeon synth that I've ever heard. There's been so many people. Big thanks to John Piper with the Siren God. It was really nice that they allowed me to use that sermon bit without them taking a cut, which would have been fine. It's a big album. That would be a very small percentage, even if they took everything from that one song. Of course, that's the most popular part of the whole thing, probably. But yeah, the ending, that was my first. I had kind of learned how to do noise, and I'd learned how to do neoclassical, and I also had good noise artist, a really good noise artist, far beyond what I'm capable of doing, work on it. So at what I was doing, then me kind of just messing with stuff, like it started out in the first in that opening trilogy of my discography. And I've spent a lot of time talking about slavery and promoting it. And a lot of people have really enjoyed it, and really, I don't want to boast about them having really enjoyed it. They really implied to me that they enjoyed it and have been really encouraging with both of those albums. So I'm very, very happy to have provided it, and I'm not gonna try to pass them up or do better. I'm gonna continue probably to just promote slavery, you know, and make other fun small projects. I have the hankering for another Contrite Heart release, and I know that people like Contrite Heart as much as anybody, so I do want to continue making Contrite Heart projects. And I should put more emphasis on those. Um, I sometimes I think I've made too many, um, or I make them too frequently, but I don't think that um, that's the way to look at it. If I was to try to make another slavery or another handwritten letters, that might be too frequent. Um, but I want to keep making Contrite Heart and just be cool, you know, just be cool and keep being happy, because I really am blessed and happy with the things that have happened in my career. If you have any questions that go further, I don't want to go on forever and ever about this project. I like that this is kind of a short explanation, but if you need more information from it and more information about it, I'm an open person. I usually respond to the comments and stuff like that. So for now, I do. I mean, maybe I'll get super caught up in life, and there's been times in my life where I can't even respond to text messages, but I'm usually pretty good. I'm just a social butterfly. What can I say? You know. Oh, if you would like to listen to it, it is on all streaming services. I released it through DistroKid, so that means Amazon, Apple, whatever. If you have a thing that you like to listen to music on, just search for it. I'm sure it's there. It's also on Gates of Hypnosis Bandcamp page. So go support Gates of Hypnos. It's there for you, and name your price. So you can grab it and not listen to commercials and stuff like that. Even though it benefits me slightly more if you listen to it like on YouTube or Spotify or something like that, then I get a little bit of streaming income. I really don't mind, and that was an indulgence. It seemed like to go ahead and let it out for everyone to hear for free, um, on Gates of Hypnos, but at a certain point, it's not about streaming income anymore. You know, I can work and make money, and I think that the idea that streams are going to pay for anything has to be, dropped off, and I dropped that off a long time ago. So it was definitely time to put it out on Gates of Hypnos and let more people enjoy it, and I think more people have. So any place that you can listen to it, please do. I'm not forcing you to. If you've heard me talk about it, that can be good enough. You don't have to sit through a 4-hour album. But if you want to have like a psychological experience, and that's the tough thing about conceptual albums, it's gonna get buried under a lot of other stuff. I have a whole lot of other releases myself that people could listen to first, and Gates of Hypnos has 1,000 other albums for you to listen to, and my personal Bandcamp collection has 8,000 other albums for people to listen to, and this one's 4 hours, so I can definitely see it. So I'm just glad that you came and watched me talk about it. You know, I'm really glad to see it grow, and I did want to give a little bit of an explanation about it. I know that there's a lot of controversy, and I don't want people to misinterpret it, even though I think I was fairly clear about what I was talking about. And I think any other topics that I would want to address can be addressed in other issues, so in other videos. Thank you so much for watching. Godspeed. Much love.